Live from Washington, D.C., this is Balance of Power with Joe Mathieu.
It's a record revision. Welcome to the Tuesday edition as the Bureau of Labor Statistics hosts the biggest ever downward revision of job growth for a single year. I'm Joe Mathieu alongside Kriti Gupta in Washington, where we have conversations ahead with reaction from both sides of the aisle over the course of the hour, and Kriti as well, just because this is Bloomberg, a major product launch from Apple on top of it all.
I think we got to go with the jobs numbers as maybe the headline, dare I say.
Indeed.
But look, we knew the economy was slowing. We knew that the labor market was slowing. What we didn't know was by this much of a margin. This really striking fear into a lot of the hearts that of the folks that are saying everything's fine. Everything's been fine.
It's a huge number, 911,000. And most of that year we're talking about, the year that ended in March, was the Biden administration. So there are big questions about what this means in terms of the actual strength of our job market. But the White House also using this as justification for the firing of the BLS commissioner.
But the question is how much of the tariff policy muddies the waters when it comes to these numbers. If things are slowing, did the White House make it worse or better?
That's right. So we're going to talk to a couple of folks who have opinions on this. Congresswoman Suzan DelBene of Washington, the Democrat who runs the DCCC, tasked with getting Democrats elected and regaining the majority, alongside Lisa McClain, the Republican Congresswoman who in fact chairs the Republican conference in the House. These should be illuminating. We'll also get an update from Ed Ludlow, who's out in Cupertino for the new phone.
I'm thrilled. Let's see if the Apple innovation cycle impresses.
Yeah, we'll see if the markets are reacting as well. Charlie Pellet has the latest on Wall Street for us, and that's where we start here on the Tuesday edition. Charlie, how's it going?
Thank you very much indeed. You touched on two of the big stories today, both Apple and also certainly the labor revisions, very much on our radar, but also, too, we're keeping an eye on developments, geopolitical developments out of the Middle East, and strike on Hamas in Doha, certainly affecting crude oil. West Texas Intermediate crude got to begin there, up 0.9%, 62.81 a barrel. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, they are all green right now. S&P advancing 6.6501 potentially. Could see a record close today on the S&P. But right now, we're up by 0.1%. The Dow up 0.2%. NASDAQ Composite Index up 23 for NASDAQ, an advance right now of 0.1%. Apple, as its big event gets underway, down 0.4%. Our Mag 7 Index, though, holding on to a gain of 0.5%. The 10-year, 4.07%, with the 2-year right now, 3.53%. Gold up $10 the ounce, 36.45, up 0.3. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.9%, 62.80 right now on WTI. And Bitcoin is tumbling 0.9%, 111,026 on Bitcoin. J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon says those BLS revisions confirm that the economy is weakening. He made the comment moments ago in a CNBC interview. But again, the Apple event underway right now in Cupertino. Apple shares down by 0.5%. Back we go to Washington. Balance of Power continues. Lots going on there as well. Once again, your hosts, Kriti Gupta and Joe Mathieu.
All right, Charlie, many thanks. We'll have more from Charlie Pellet, his view of the markets in about 20 minutes from now. We are, in fact, watching Apple, as Charlie mentioned. It's going to be one of the screamer headlines that comes off the terminal this hour with a range of new products, the biggest product launch event of the year. Kriti, I don't know if any of these are moving the needle for you, but we do have a new iPhone, apparently, and the thinnest iPhone that Apple has put together.
I mean, the pressure that Apple has had at the moment in terms of getting something that's new, that's exciting, that's actually drastically changed from previous iterations is enormous.
Well, let's see what's on the menu here. Ed Ludlow's got this covered for us, of course, the co-host of Bloomberg Tech. He joins us live from Cupertino, where this event is just getting underway. Ed, is it all about the phone today or more that you've got your eyes on?
It is all about the phone, and you're right, the event's just underway, no news yet, but we have Bloomberg reporting. So you have the iPhone 17 generation, which ranges from a base model to a Pro and a Pro Max at the higher end. And in the middle, based on Bloomberg's reporting, we will get Apple's thinnest ever phone, the Air, 5.5mm thickness. Why does it matter? It's been a long time since there has been a form factor or fundamental hardware change from Apple. And I was listening to what you guys were saying. Actually, we know what we're going to get, pretty much, based on Bloomberg reporting. Most of the time, Mark Gurman is accurate. A big overhanging outstanding question relates to what's happening in Washington, D.C. Does Apple raise prices and pass it on to the consumer? Does it not raise prices and swallow that cost along with its carrier partners, T-Mobile, AT&T? What do the carriers do to incentivize the consumer? Why does that all matter? Because the environment is more expensive because of tariffs.
Ed, talk to us as well then about whether or not we get an idea of whether people are still actually going to be interested in not just the iPhone, but perhaps the advanced AI piece of the iPhone. This is something that Apple has lagged when it comes to its competitors. Is this the moment where they can impress on that front?
This is not the moment, but it's still worth discussion. These iPhone event days are typically sell the news events where the stock will fall. But if you look at historic data, after 30 or 60 days where the handset, the hardware resonates, the stock tends to go on a rally on that longer term basis of 2 months from event day. Now, the AI piece is we have the reporting from Bloomberg. A Siri revamp, that's the AI voice assistant, is expected in the spring of next year. I bring that all up in the context of what is happening behind me in the event space. In June, Apple had its developers conference, which is a software event. On stage, one of the executives said, "We have nothing to say right now about Siri and AI." And in that moment, the stock fell 2%. Sometimes with these Apple and technology events, it's as much about what they don't say that moves the needle for investors and consumers as it is about what they do say. And that's how I would think about it over the course of the next 90 minutes.
And fascinating. Is there more to this than just the phone today, Ed? I just want our listeners and viewers to know that the new AirPods Pro are just being unveiled. Do any of these move the needle for you, or it's that new form factor you talked about on the 17?
Yeah. For the technology enthusiast or the technology sector analyst and investor, there are many individual stories. With the AirPods, they're integrating heartbeat monitoring or heart rate monitoring. That moves Apple deeper into the healthcare space. With the high-end watch, we expect it to integrate satellite connectivity. That puts it on a collision course with Garmin. For all of those ultra marathon Ironman enthusiasts out there, Apple wants to be in that segment too, or if you're stuck up a mountain is my favorite example. But it comes back to the bread and butter. Why are we here today? Apple is the world's third most valuable company. Half of its revenue or more comes from iPhone. We're expecting the biggest update to that hardware category in a really long time. And from a market cap perspective, a weighting on the index perspective, we could see shares move. And so there are lots of these things to track all in one go. I'll go back to Kriti's question. Just don't be hanging around waiting for an update on AI.
Okay, we got it, Ed. Thank you. We'll get more from Ed Ludlow when the big stuff drops, and we do expect a lot of headlines to be coming out over the course of the next 20 to 30 minutes with that new phone in the offing here as we keep tabs on what Tim Cook is talking about. We told you she was coming, the chair of the House Republican Conference. Now that lawmakers are back in town with some pretty big questions about government funding, about the state of our economy, and a lot more. Lisa McClain, the Congresswoman from Michigan's 9th District, with us live now from Capitol Hill. Congresswoman, thanks for your patience as we get through some of the Apple news. We'll call you on your iPhone if we have any issues here. But it's good to have you back, and I'm sure you saw that massive downward revision at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The Trump administration is using that essentially as justification for his firing of the BLS commissioner. Most of this jobs data, though, was accrued during the Biden administration. What needs to be done to fix this other than adding a new boss at the top?
Well, a lot needs to be done. Let's start with that. Let's have an honest conversation with the American people. Listen, Biden's economic policies were so bad for the American people that he and his administration actually had to fudge and manipulate, and I would even argue lie about a lot of the data. Listen, we can't fix a problem unless we admit to ourselves that we have a problem, and we need accurate data to do that. So that is where I applaud the presidency, this administration, and Republicans for let's get accurate data, let's see what the problems are, and then we can fix it. But let's stop lying and fear-mongering and just manipulating the data to the American people. We are doing that with the one big beautiful bill, or what I call it now, the working families tax cuts. We are doing that. We are trying to jumpstart the economy, to bring manufacturing jobs back, but it is imperative that we have accurate data.
I absolutely. And look, we cover Wall Street and we talk about data quality a lot around here, and that's kind of one piece of this, Congresswoman, but to suggest that it's intentionally being rigged or manipulated for political reasons is a very different allegation. Do you have any evidence that that was the case?
Well, just look at the facts. I mean, this jobs report was off by how much? Right? These are surveys. Do you think that everybody is really telling the truth on this? I doubt it, right? I doubt it. And for me, this is what the Democrats have done. But that would take a conspiracy to involve an entire agency, wouldn't it? I mean, I appreciate how far off these numbers were, and we have big problems with the response rate. But what's going on in that building that would put the rank and file on the same page as the commissioner in trying to conspire to rig economic data? All you have to do is look at the Democratic Party. They have no plan, no vision, and no leader. They don't deal in facts. They deal in hyperboles. They deal with what-if scenarios. Just be straight and be honest with the American people. That's all I'm saying. And what I am saying is, thank God that we have a president who believes in transparency, that actually cares about getting the facts. Because I think once we have the facts, I don't think the American people expect us to be perfect, but they do expect progress, and it all starts with factual data.
Congresswoman, the White House has been long pointing to the weakness that we're seeing in the labor market as a reason to cut rates. But the argument over at the Federal Reserve is that despite a weakening economy, which we've known for quite some time, the tariff policy coming out of the White House is ultimately muddying the waters. What do you say to that hesitation when it comes to addressing the weakness that we're seeing in the labor market?
Well, I think we're actually trying to address the weaknesses in the labor markets that, the Democrats have left us with in the past 4 years with the Biden administration. That's why President Trump has already brought manufacturing and investments back here to the United States. That's why President Trump has already renegotiated over 80 trade deals with different countries to make a level playing field for the American people and the American worker, because for so long we've been taken advantage of. He is trying and doing, I might add, leveling that playing field.
But at what cost, Congresswoman? What are you hearing from families and constituents in your home state of Michigan that are talking about the toll, whether it's temporary or not, that some of these policies are taking, especially when it comes to manufacturing?
Yes. Well, different. I sit in Macomb County, which is heavily auto manufacturing. And I can share with you the people from my district, and I've been on the road with the tour, talking to people around the country, not just in my district, but they see this through the lens of job creation, American job creation. And they understand that we need to reset and level the playing field. And what I'm seeing is they're applauding that, because they would rather have American jobs, like I said, and they see it through the lens of job creation long term. And they understand that there may be a little bit of short-term discomfort for massive long-term gains and less layoffs. That's what the people in my district are excited about.
Congresswoman, you mentioned the president's big, beautiful bill and a bit of a rebranding. We're calling it now the Working Class Families Tax Cut Bill. The president had touched on this during the cabinet meeting. Why the rebranding? Are we having trouble selling it? What's the point of changing the name of the bill that every American seems to have on the tip of their tongues?
Well, I think we could call it anything. We could call it the border security bill, the energy independence bill, the tax cut bill. One of the things that I love about the tax cut bill is it is for working families. Remember, every single Democrat voted to raise the American person's taxes, every single. So if you want to say that this bill helps the rich, it doesn't. It helps the working families. And if you poll, and you've seen the data, all of the individual pieces of this bill, if you take them out, would people rather have more money in their pocket or the government's pocket? Overwhelmingly, that sells, right? But when you bundle it all together, sometimes because of the fear mongering, it gets lost. So we're trying to take the message to the street that Republicans care about keeping more money in your pocket. We don't want to raise your taxes. In fact, we voted not to raise your taxes. The Democrats voted to raise your taxes.
Congresswoman, let's talk about the government shutdown that's right on our doorstep just at the end of this month. The government's running out of time to find some sort of solution. When do we see a CR hit the floor?
Well, I'm hoping that we see a very short-term CR, but at the end of the day, we are committed to keeping the government open, Republicans. And whether it is going, I mean, we're already talking about doing a conference, which I think is great. We've already passed, I think by the end of this week, we'll have passed everything out of committee, which is great. We are doing our work. Again, we've seen this movie before, but we are committed to keeping the government open, and all options right now are on the table. And we invite all the Democrats to stop their blocking and their defensive strategies and come and work with us to help the American people. But at the end of the day, we got to tighten our belt. We got to make sure that we're giving the American people value for their dollar. So stay tuned. We're in process of working on that right now as we speak.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, a lot of Democrats have told us on this program, Madam Chair, that they did try to work with you. They thought they had a deal, a budget bill passed, funds were allocated, and then Republicans rescinded them. There was the first rescissions package and then the pocket rescissions, and that's why they're throwing their hands up in the air. Is there something you can offer Democrats to regain some trust? And I'm pointing right now to the extension of Obamacare subsidies at the end of the year. That's what some Democratic members seem to think would bring them to the table. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, we are exploring that, and we have a couple different factions, right? Medicaid and Medicare have expanded and grown so exponentially since 2019, right? With the expansion of Medicare, it's quite frankly a lot of money. And take a look at what happened in COVID, right? With all of these the tax credits, it just blew up. We've got to get a handle on both Medicaid and Medicare, because if we don't get a handle on it, eventually we're going to be forced to deal with it. And nobody, I think, wants that. I really and truly don't think anyone wants to deal with that when we're in a crisis situation. So I'm actually an optimist, believe it or not, by trade. I believe that we will come together and get the best, most conservative deal on the floor for the American people. But it is a negotiation. You do have to give and take a little bit, right? I'd love to get everything I want. It only happens when I'm with my husband. But we got to get to a better spot for the American people.
Well, I think that would ring true for a lot of folks, and my sympathies to your husband. I bet he's a good man and a great American. Congresswoman, thank you for coming back on to talk with us. Lisa McClain, the chairwoman of the House Republican Conference, that's Michigan's 9th District, and we're going to be speaking with a Democrat momentarily. Suzan DelBene, who chairs the DCCC, will be with us after we take you back out to Cupertino. We've had some headlines flying on this Apple event that's underway right now with new product launches that have Ed Ludlow's attention, the co-host of Bloomberg Tech, back with us from Cupertino. What are we learning, Ed?
Yeah, it's interesting to see Apple shares move pretty sharply from a modest decline of about 0.8% into positive territory. And the thing that I don't think many had on their bingo card is that it is the latest generation of AirPods Pro that has moved the needle on the stock. Okay, maybe we were treading water to the event, and now that we're underway, that accounts for some of the move. But the AirPods Pro that they've announced has two capabilities that appear to move the needle for the market. One, simultaneous translation. It was also interesting to see shares of Duolingo pair their gains markedly. That's Apple coming with simultaneous translation for language technology market. They also announced that the AirPods Pro, you're working out, Joe, on the treadmill, you've got your AirPod Pros in, it does heart rate sensing now. Another piece of evidence that Apple, across its full spectrum of hardware, moving into the health market or health tech market, seems to have moved the needle on the stock. And I think my colleagues in the Top Live blog are kind of saying, oh, that's interesting too.
When it comes to comparing different pieces of the Apple offerings, whether it's the AirPods Pro or this latest version versus the Apple Watch, what's the juicier launch at the moment, Ed?
Yeah, it's so interesting. You know, one of the features we're waiting for with the watch, let's be honest, the mainstay is still going to be the latest generation of iPhones, but we're minutes and minutes away from that. They're talking in the reporting about the latest generation high-end watch having satellite connectivity. In the market context, that puts Apple in competition with Garmin, which many listeners on this show and viewers of this show, they may use in the extreme sports context, or they might be world explorers in the remotes of the world and they want to be connected through their high-end fitness watch. It's just more evidence that Apple is moving into very specific niches and expanding the capabilities of its hardware to move into those markets that it might not traditionally pay in at a higher price point. A lot of emphasis in the world of technology right now about a phone and a smartwatch's ability to communicate with the satellite outside of the cellular network. It opens up doors for a lot of markets.
Yeah, we've got some headlines on the watch here. Series 11 with a more durable design. Ed, to your point, adding 5G, a 5G modem for cellular connectivity. This will be interesting to see what comes next. Ed Ludlow tells us that we'll have more on the phone moments away, so we'll be back with Ed only moments from now. I want to bring you back to Capitol Hill as well to continue our conversation that we were having over government funding and the news of the day, including this massive downward revision coming from the BLS. We just heard from the Republican chair of the House Conference, the House Republican Conference, I should say. We now hear from the chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. That's Congresswoman Suzan DelBene, the Democrat from Washington, with us live from Capitol Hill. Congresswoman DelBene, welcome back. It's good to have you, as always, on Bloomberg TV and radio. Republicans are using this downward revision from the BLS today, a record revision, some 911,000 jobs we thought were there and are not, as essentially justification for Donald Trump to have fired the commissioner of the BLS. The chairwoman who was on with us before said she believes that it was politically motivated, intentionally manipulated. How are you looking at this?
Well, I think it's been clear this administration, if they ever see information they don't like, they blame the source. I think what's happening on the ground right now is prices are going up for families across the country. The economy's struggling. The Republicans are trying to rip away health care from millions of people. People are concerned on the ground about what this means for their future. Republicans promised to lower costs on day one. They're not doing that. The American people are feeling it. That's what's important right now. That's what people are feeling, and that's why people hate this bill that Republicans went through. It's only making things worse.
Chairwoman, is this a reason for the Federal Reserve to cut rates? Was Donald Trump right that this economy needs some help?
First of all, they should be independent and making that decision independently. That's the role of the Federal Reserve. Donald Trump has done nothing to lower costs. We've seen chaos, random tariff policies that have raised costs on American families, costs of housing, food, health care, energy costs going up for families across the country. It's a broken promise from Republicans. They promised to lower costs. They've done nothing. They've only made it worse.
Well, there's a worry about funding the government beyond this month, as you well know. Congresswoman, what's going to happen here? We've talked about this a couple of times following the first rescissions package. We've had other Democrats come on the air and tell us they will not vote with Republicans, that they won't make a deal if already approved funds are being clawed back. Never mind the contents of the president's big, beautiful bill. What are you hearing from your members? Are we shutting down, or will there be a conversation?
Well, let's be clear. The Republicans have the White House. They have the majorities in the Senate and in the House. This is on them. They are leading the way, and frankly, they're not leading at all. They can't agree with each other. And the one thing is, they're not listening to the American people. The American people want policies that help families across the country, that lower costs. Republicans are only interested in one thing: doing whatever Donald Trump tells them to do. So if we really want to make sure we are doing the right thing, first of all, Congress controls the power of the purse. We should be supporting policies that help working families, working to lower costs. Number one thing that we can do, not even on the radar of Republicans.
Well, you know what we keep hearing from folks close to the White House, Madam Chair, is that Donald Trump and Russ Vought are saying go ahead, make my day. If you shut down the government, we keep it shut down, and we'll decide who gets paid. We'll decide which agencies stay open. We'll decide who is working for the federal government in that period of time. Is there a part of you that worries if you shut it down, you can't get it back open?
Well, again, Congress has the power of the purse. That Congress should be leading. What you just said really highlights that we have no leadership from Republicans. They're in the majority in the Senate. They're in the majority in the House. They should be leading independent of the executive branch. They should be leading on appropriations funding bills. But they're not, because they're incapable of doing that. They're just looking at the White House. We need a Congress that's going to stand up for the American people. Folks are going to fight to lower costs, fight to help working families. That's our number one goal. That's what we hear when we go and actually talk to voters when we're at home about the needs that they have. That's number one. And folks, you see it in the numbers, in approval ratings, et cetera. People are angry about the path that Republicans have taken us down.
Chairwoman, let's talk about another topic that I think is cascading not just in Washington but across the country, and that is the effort of redistricting. I'm going to try to get my words right there. Does the Democratic effort to redistrict stop at California, or should we be looking at other states?
Well, let's be clear what's happened here. Republicans are scared. They know they can't win based on policy. We just talked about that. They are not focused on the needs of the American people. So if they're not willing to actually fight for policies that help working families, and if that's not their priority, then they know they're going to lose. And so instead of actually fighting and listening to their constituents, they're trying to rig the system. That's why you saw Donald Trump go to Texas and say, basically, give me 5 seats. This wasn't the people of Texas asking for this. This was Donald Trump saying it. And the people of Texas hate this. They think they should pick their representatives, not have politicians pick their voters. But Republicans are doubling down on this, and we absolutely are going to fight back. And I think you see that happening in California, where it's going to the voters to decide, a huge difference there. But Republicans are looking at doing it in other parts of the country. A judge in Utah made it clear that Utah has to draw a new map. So that is a good thing that's happening there. So yes, there are other states that are going to get involved. We're going to fight back. We're not going to let them walk down this path to try to rig the system and put in place the majority and really stop the voices of the American people.
Well, you know, it's something when we think about the midterms, some of the races that we're looking at, and I know that you've got a special today in Virginia, you've got one later this month in Arizona, where Democrats are favored. But looking at some of the young faces that have emerged, for instance, in competing for Jerry Nadler's seat that he's leaving open in New York, and even on the other side of the Hill, I know you're not a senator here as you chair the DCCC, but James Talrico, for instance, speaking of redistricting, entering that race, it looks like, for Senate. Will a new generation of candidates be the ones to bring majorities back to Democrats on Capitol Hill?
Well, I think one way we win elections, especially in purple districts, is by having great candidates who are talking about the issues that matter, are talking about the issues that are important to their communities, and are strong, independent voices for their communities. We actually have 14 Democrats right now who represent districts that Donald Trump also won in 2024. And why did they win in those districts? Because they are strong voices for their communities. The majority, we need 3 more seats to take back the majority. The majority is about winning in more of those seats. We know when we have great candidates, which we have many people across the country who want to run because they want to stand up for our country and fight against the damage that's being done by this president and this administration and this Congress. They're ready to stand up for their communities. That's how we win. And if you look at special elections across the country, Democrats are running 15 points ahead because people are rejecting the Republican agenda.
Well, you had 2 more Democrats, as mentioned, Virginia, Arizona this month. Madam Chair, that puts the discharge petition on the floor. Democrats
2 more.
Going to be the reason why the Epstein files are made public?
They only had a 3-seat majority, but we've had 3 vacancies. So getting 2 people back, getting the election today in Virginia, Arizona, and then further down the election for the special election in Texas. 3 more votes. Republicans have struggled to pass some of their bills just by one vote. So it's really important to have more people here voting for the American people.
Well, I know you'll be counting the votes in the meantime. Congresswoman Suzan DelBene, the Democrat from Washington, chair of the DCCC. Thank you, as always, for the conversation on Bloomberg TV and radio. We haven't even heard from the panel yet this hour. Let's bring them together. Bloomberg Politics contributors Jeanne, Zaino, and Rick Davis are with us to react to these conversations we've been bringing you this hour here on Bloomberg TV and radio. Rick is our Republican strategist, partner at Stonecourt Capital. Jeanne is democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. Again, both contributors here at Bloomberg. Rick, we just heard a pretty interesting contrast of opinions when it comes to messaging and branding around the president's big, beautiful bill. Republicans don't want to call it that so much anymore. They're working on some new ideas like the Working Families Tax Cut bill. Does that tell you anything about how the August recess went?
Yeah, they must have gotten a pretty good pushback. By the time they got back, they'd already renamed the bill. So we're not even talking about the big, beautiful bill anymore. And so I would say that if everybody had applauded that and were signing up and Republicans were enthusiastic, they'd never be changing the name of that bill. So it's almost self-defining. But what I have seen today on the program, both Republicans and Democrats alike, kind of retreating into those talking points. Republicans talking about the bill, why it should be good for you, got to go sell that before the midterm elections. And Democrats kind of retreating into their economic message that, Donald Trump's not doing enough. I'll be honest, I'm shocked that there isn't more aggressive approach, especially by the Democrats. We just heard from Chairwoman DelBene. I mean, they should really be going after this Republican administration if they expect to create change. And so I don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how we resolve the current funding cycle, because nobody put anything on the table today that said, hey, there's a compromise afoot and we are going to avoid a government shutdown.
Jeanne, where should the focus for Democrats be right now? In some of the economic messaging Rick was just talking about, or perhaps a bigger focus on this revisions number, part of which is data that goes back to the Biden administration?
Yeah, I think it should be both. In fact, they are both part of the same story, which is a faltering and dismal, as you look forward, economy. And that's what I found so stunning by Representative McClain's discussion with you guys. She started by talking about Joe Biden's economy and talking about where the Democrats have faltered. But the reality is Republicans own the White House and they own Congress. So they need to sell what they have done. And there's a reason she's not selling it. And there's a reason they're changing the name, because it is wildly unpopular. And if you look just at the manufacturing numbers, Donald Trump promised to bring manufacturing back. Now he's saying we need to wait a couple years for that. But look at those numbers. In his time, 78,000 jobs lost in manufacturing. That's not what he promised. And then a third thing I would just add is that she was making the claim that her voters are prepared for pain, that they were willing to suffer pain. They understand economic pain is what's necessary. I'm not sure that that's true, and I'm not sure that's a winning message on the campaign trail. And if it's true, how long is this pain and to what end? All of that needs to be addressed, and it was just left hanging. So I think if Democrats can focus on message, to Rick's point, and focus on the economy, they do have something to run against, which is a bill that is not popular.
Mm-hmm. Two members from the left and the right, and our great panel, Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino, Bloomberg Politics contributors, to help us find the news. It's great, as always, to have your insights. We have breaking news from Cupertino. As we promised, we want to get back out there. The new iPhone has just dropped. iPhone 17, and Ed Ludlow, the co-host of Bloomberg Tech, is in Cupertino with the latest. Is this what we expected, Ed?
Yeah, so far we just had the base model iPhone 17, but Tim Cook at the start of his remarks said that we will get 4 variants of that iPhone 17. As a reminder, we expect them to be the base model that they're currently explaining right now, through to a Pro and Pro Max at the higher end, better performance processor that's developed in-house by Apple, stronger cameras, and somewhere in the middle, the big thing today, iPhone 17 Air, a ultra-thin variant of the iPhone 17 generation. You guys know, you may well be users, that they have a MacBook Air, they have an iPad Air. But in terms of a category that's more than half of their sales, a thin variant of an iPhone represents a push forward in the category, something that Apple hasn't done on the hardware innovation side for some time. It's playing out before my eyes in the presentation. I don't have any more details than that, other than the base variant has Apple's A19 in-house processor. What kind of processors will we get in those more expensive models?
Ed, if I remember correctly from the last time I went MacBook shopping, which I admit is a while, mine has stuck around with me, the Air is far more expensive, especially when it comes to the iPhone. We're already looking for tariff increases baked into the price. Is this another cost increase on top of that tariff bump?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the main headline and, you know, always a risk. But if I were a betting man and we get a price that is slightly elevated, that our colleagues in the newsroom will put a red headline on the terminal, because it's an important consideration at this point. The technology development arc is really interesting. When I was at university, I won't say when, but MacBook was out then. In 2008, the MacBook Air came out. It was so expensive relative to the rest of the range. It also had some diminished features, taking into account how thin it was. But with time, Apple was able to make it a better value for money proposition. And if you read Bloomberg, Mark Gurman's reporting, that's what we expect with the Air, in this case with the iPhone. It will be expensive at first, priced between the base model and the Pro Max variants, but it will have diminished camera, diminished battery life, diminished processing power to account for the limited space, and they'll innovate on top of that in the months and years to come. I keep staring down at my Bloomberg terminal and the live feed and my social media feeds to try and give you some more information, but I'll be honest, they're just filling a bit right now, and I'm waiting.
That's pretty good. I don't know how you do all of this. By the way, they didn't even have the internet when I started in college, so I'll just leave that where it is. The 17, we just got a couple of details here, Ed. The entry model, Lavender Sage, Mist Blue, Black and White, 6.3-inch screen. That is slightly larger than before. And Apple ProMotion with 120 hertz refresh rate. Will people notice a difference when they look at the screen?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so the idea is that when you are, you know, I'm holding up a prior generation iPhone for illustrative purposes, but when you have a dynamic piece of content on your phone, you might be scrolling a website that has both text and video. What they're talking about is the phone's ability to adjust the frequency that the screen's displaying. It just makes it a better experience. When you're not doing anything, it powers down. That adds to power efficiency. By the way, the colors are important. We haven't spoken much about China. But remember, China is a big market for Apple, and there are colors which historically do better there. Red is one, for example. It is a lucky color in China. In the base variant, at least, I saw some pastel, beautiful-looking colors, sure, but there's nothing red there. It's an observation that I'm making to try and fill some time until I get some more details.
The 17 has an A19 chip, though, that is also faster, more efficient, that speaks to the power saving and the consumer experience on your end, Ed?
Yep. Yeah, the work that Apple does in-house on its processors is critically important. A19 represents to the consumer a powerful processor that speaks to the capabilities of the base model phone. Extrapolate forward, again, at this stage, because the presentation's underway, this is based on Bloomberg's reporting and Mark Gurman's reporting. But we care about the processor inside of the Air ultra-thin variant in particular, also the modem. So historically, Apple has relied on Qualcomm for the modem chip that goes into its smartphones. In other words, the connectivity to the cellular network, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi in other cases. Apple's doing more of that in-house, but our reporting suggests that its own work has yielded a chip that's not as efficient as Qualcomm's. So they're trying to move away from a traditional supplier there. That might come out. It's something to watch for in the next 30 to 45 minutes.
Fascinating. This is what a great opportunity to geek out with Ed Ludlow as he joins us live from Cupertino. Ed, we'll get back to you. We still have the skinny phone announcement to come here, and we'll let you keep tabs on things. It sounds pretty wild there, actually, when the news broke. Ed is clearly not alone. I'm Joe Mathieu in Washington alongside Kriti Gupta. This is Balance of Power, the Tuesday edition on Bloomberg TV and radio. We're watching shares of Apple and the markets at large. Let's hear more about it from Charlie Pellet. He's got his read on the markets from world headquarters in New York. Charlie?
Hi, thank you very much, Joe Mathieu, and good day from New York. Right now, we do have Apple shares. They are trading lower. Keep it locked into Bloomberg for the very latest developments out of Cupertino. But Apple shares right now, they are declining by 0.4% as Apple announces the iPhone 17 adds satellite connectivity to the new Apple Watch Ultra, also launches the new Watch SE with a faster chip and an always-on screen. Apple, by the way, says it does expect FDA clearance for hypertension detection soon. But Apple shares, after all of these announcements, we did see an initial pop higher, but right now we got Apple down by 0.4%. U.S. stocks trading higher. Right now, the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all advancing. Key takeaway at this hour, S&P at a record 65.06 right now, up by 0.2%. Could see a record close today on the S&P. The Dow up 181, up 0.4%. NASDAQ up 33 right now. That is a gain of 0.1%. The Mag 7 index, of which Apple is a part, up 0.5%, but again, Apple down by 0.3%. Your 10-year 4.06% with a 2-year currently yielding 3.53%. Gold up under 0.2%, 36.42 the ounce, and crude up 0.9% on heightened Middle Eastern tensions. Bitcoin right now down 0.9%, just below $111,000. So again, recapping, S&P up 11, up 0.2, Apple down now by 0.2%. Balance of Power continues now in Washington. Back we go once again, your hosts, Joe Mathieu and Kriti Gupta.
We thank you, Charlie Pellet, and he'll have more on the markets for you coming up at the top of the hour, 2 p.m., right around Business Week Daily Time. We are live from Washington, where a White House press briefing is just getting underway right now, and the press secretary has been making a bit of news. Caroline Levitt at the podium letting us know that President Trump will be traveling to the United Kingdom. Yes, he is on his way to the UK September 16th through the 18th. That's a week from today. Want to go to the White House for more. It's been a busy day there, even though we have not heard from the president yet. We will a couple of hours from now, knowing that we've had a massive, if not record size, downward revision from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, pulling 911,000 jobs off the table in the year that ended in March. Bloomberg Washington correspondent Tyler Kendall has been all over this story since the revision hit at 10 a.m. and has been speaking with various members of the Republican Party on both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue. Tyler, what can you tell us?
Yeah. Hey, Joe, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there, right? Today, we got this data that showed that U.S. job growth was far less robust than previously reported for the year through March. And it's really ramping up the pressure on the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates. And a lot of that pressure has been coming, of course, from this White House. Now, worth us mentioning here, this is a preliminary report. We'll get the finalized numbers.
I haven't seen it till now.
Early next year, but while the administration has been really critical of these revisions, this is a routine process, and experts have said, of course, yes, these revisions in recent years have been a lot larger, but that's due to some unique conditions related to the reporting process and the conditions now that we are post the pandemic. But the White House really wasted no time capitalizing on this, kicking out a statement to us reporters here in Washington saying that this bolsters their argument that there needs to be new leadership when it comes to the BLS. And it's an argument that congressional Republicans are picking up on too, as we wait for President Trump's nominee, E.J. Antoni, to head the BLS to make his way through the Senate confirmation process. And I caught up with one senator, Senator Markwayne Mullin, a Republican from Oklahoma, earlier today, and I asked him, what would E.J. Antoni do differently if he is appointed to lead the BLS?
This just shows why it's so important that we get EJ put in his position, because the numbers are constantly being corrected. I mean, we had huge revisions underneath the Biden administration. The technology we're using to get these job reports are extremely outdated. We haven't actually updated the way we're getting job report numbers in decades. I don't know if you know it or not, but the way we actually get our job reports numbers is picking up the phone and dialing landlines, and then having someone do a survey. With all the technology that we have, with the AI technology we have, with the information that flows in from state chamber of commerce, from local chamber of commerce, from different payroll companies, we should be able to do more accurate data collection and allow small businesses owners like myself to be able to make changes, be able to adjust with economy rather than having to wait for revised numbers to come out, because this is happening way too often at this point.
So a few different threads I want to pull on. You mentioned EJ, so EJ Antoni, who's President Trump's nominee to be the next BLS commissioner. What is EJ Antoni actually going to do differently? Is it the sort of changes that you're talking about?
Yeah, so when we sit down, if you've listened to EJ talk, he's always said that we've got to bring in new technology. It needs to be updated. Government as a whole needs to be updated. President Trump ran on changing America to work for the American people, and we're like stagnated. For some reason, the government is the hardest thing to make any changes in. Even when you try to, for me being an appropriator, when we try to appropriate dollars for new technology, they take years to do a study on the technology that we're wanting for them to fund, and by the time they implement the technology, it's outdated. What President Trump and his whole administration is doing is updating the American government to work for the people, and that is a lot harder change than what you may think. But EJ, when we sat down and had a long conversation with him, he was very adamant. I'm wanting to modernize our new data system that we use in the Bureau of Labor Statistics. We need to update it like corporations have today, yet federal government doesn't operate that way.
Joe and Kriti, it's worth pointing out the BLS has seen their funding, but also their staffing slashed under the Trump administration. Their staffing's down about 20% since January, and we had a good article out today on the Bloomberg terminal showing that 12 out of the top 25 official spots at the BLS currently are vacant.
Yeah, that's right, Tyler. Thank you so much, and a great conversation with the Senator Tyler Kendall live from the North Lawn of the White House. We've got breaking news again from Cupertino, so we're going to continue this staccato coverage here between Washington and the Apple event, where we find Bloomberg Tech co-host Ed Ludlow standing by. This is the new phone and the thin version. Ed, what do we know about it?
Yeah, the thin version, the Air, confirming Bloomberg's reporting that this was to come. They're going through the details basically from an engineering level, but some of the differences with the iPhone 17 Air, 6.5-inch screen, they're talking about basically how they engineered the thinness by placing more of the components in the top part of the smartphone where the camera's located. Limited details so far. Basically, there are going to be loads of people out there saying, well, hold on, if I have an ultra-thin phone with a very delicate screen, what happens if I drop it? Well, that's where they've started. It has a ceramic shield over the screen, which makes it 3x more scratch resistant than in prior models. Of course, part of the innovation when you miniaturize any consumer electronic comes with the silicon. They're actually yet to go into detail on that, but they started by saying that's how we cracked it. We're able to miniaturize, make a thinner smartphone by working on the chip. And inside of it is an A19, I think they're now outlining, A19 Pro semiconductor. So as we get more of this information on how they did it, I believe my colleagues in the newsroom sent the red headline. To be fair, I did say that would happen. And the market is kind of having its typical sell the news moment, I think, which happens on most iPhone event days.
All right, Ed, talk to us a little bit then about some of the pricing. Are we still waiting for those numbers? And what have the analyst community talked about when it comes to just how much those prices could go up?
Still waiting on pricing. It will be critically important. The backdrop is Tim Cook, Apple's CEO, and his relationship with President Trump. The pressure on this from this administration for Apple to move more of its supply chain to the United States. Be in no doubt, the majority of the supply chain for these handsets is in China and in part in India. But the pricing is critically important in the competitive landscape as well. Samsung has already come out with an ultra-thin phone this summer. It has come out with newer updated models of AI-capable handsets. Samsung elected not to pass those price increases onto the consumer. Google and Pixel have come up with updated handsets within this calendar year. Google opted not to pass on those prices to the consumer. And when I say pass on those prices, the environment means that manufacturing is more expensive, components more expensive because of tariffs. So that's what the story will be. It will be a story if they do raise prices. It will be a story if they don't and they decide to swallow it. There is no precedent from the peers in the smartphone market that suggests they will raise prices in this instant.
And as you suggested already, Ed, this too will be a big story here in Washington, D.C. when we get some of the answers to these questions. Many thanks for the great coverage at Apple HQ in Cupertino. Of course, that's Ed Ludlow. He's going to have a big show on Bloomberg Tech tomorrow. I'm Joe Mathieu alongside Kriti Gupta in Washington, where today we had quite the bombshell from BLS, a record-sized downward revision. If you didn't see this hit at 10 a.m., 911,000 jobs we thought existed in the year ending in March do not exist. Which brings us back to the story, of course, of a couple of weeks ago when the president started speaking about data quality and, in fact, fired the commissioner of the BLS when the jobs data came out so weak in relation to estimates. We've had a series of conversations with administration officials who have agreed with the president that there was political motivation behind those numbers, which is something that we have no evidence of. It's just this very hour, Congresswoman Lisa McClain, who chairs the House Republican Conference, made that assertion. I want to spend some time on the downward revision on the state of our economy with Douglas Holtz-Eakin. It's been a while since we've had a chance to speak with the president of the American Action Forum, former director of the Congressional Budget Office, CBO, and knows a little bit about the way this stuff works. Douglas, it's great to have you back. A downward revision of this size hitting now, I realize, is seismic because this story was in the air. But when you look back across past revisions, what is really at work here? Is it simply a lack of proper response by employers, the sort of lackadaisical way they handle this? Or are the numbers getting bogged down in algorithms that we cannot identify?
Well, first of all, your listeners should know this is a big revision. Almost 1 million jobs sounds big, but it's 0.6% of payroll. Typically, the revisions are in the neighborhood of 0.3%. So, but by the standards of these revisions, this is a pretty big change in the numbers. And I think the right way to think about it is, the U.S. economy is getting bigger. We have more firms, we have more employees, and the sample size that they use each month isn't really changing. On top of that, and that's a matter of just, staff and money. There's no doubt about that. On top of that, the response rates have been declining. So the effective sample size is getting smaller in an economy that's getting larger. The estimates as a result are less reliable than you might like. And when we do these comprehensive benchmark revisions, you have more data, you find bigger gaps between the noisy monthly numbers and the reality. So this can be fixed. The president emphasizes new leadership. He's entitled to the leadership he wants BLS, but new leadership isn't going to change sample sizes. You need better information each month to get estimates that are closer to the actuality.
Mm-hmm.
Douglas, is this another reason to cut rates? And in an environment where we can't even trust the data, is cutting rates the right policy response?
Well, I want to be real clear. You can still trust the data. They just simply are a smaller sample than we might like. And anytime you have small samples, you're subject to more sampling error. It's not that the data have a bias to them or lack integrity. They're just too small a snapshot on a very large and diverse economy. And that's the best data we have. You should make policy based on that. Now, remember, this is the year that ended in March. And so this precedes Liberation Day tariff announcements, all the things that have happened since. If we look at the performance of the economy over that period, outside of the health sector, there is no job creation. This economy is dead in the water. There's a lot of evidence of that. And I think, the Fed should act accordingly. That's the right way to think about this.
Press secretary is talking about this revision as we are speaking. Douglas, Caroline Levitt says the payroll data, one of the biggest revisions ever, showing we need new Fed leadership. Fed needs to cut rates. We need truthful, honest data from the BLS. It brings me to E.J. Antoni. The president has already selected who he wants to run BLS. What difference will he make? Is it about expanding sample sizes, to your point? Can he make the department more efficient?
He may be able to make the department more efficient. I don't know enough to comment on that. He may be able to convince House and Senate appropriators to give the BLS more money in fact, expand the sample size, contact more firms each month, get a better estimate of new firm arrival, which is a very hard thing to do, and those firms which have gone bankrupt. These are the hard parts of this data collection, and having a broader net would absolutely improve things. But he may be able to do that. I think that in the end, it's not going to be a matter of one's view of economics. It's not going to be a matter of one's view of the politics of the situation. It's going to be how can you effectively harness the machinery we have to get more information into the BLS data. That's the key. And I hope he can do that. We'll see if he has a strategy. He talks about it in his confirmation hearings. That'll be a good thing to know.
Douglas, there's a big question in Washington right now around, or at least the concern around the association of Donald Trump's name with that of Jeffrey Epstein, to whatever truth that may show up to be. Talk to us a little bit about whether you're concerned about there being economic ramifications from that narrative.
I honestly don't think that has a big impact on the economics. There are two big levers that matter for the economics. They are the tariffs, and that's going to be decided by the courts and the administration. My own view is that even if the Supreme Court strikes down the so-called IEEPA tariffs, this president has shown his hand. He's shown the level of tariffs he would like to collect. He's shown where he wants to collect them, and he has other authorities that he will probably use to put tariffs back in place. So having the economy adjust to a $400 billion a year tax increases is one of the primary economic challenges right now, and that remains. And the second big lever is the Fed. The Fed came into the year restrictive. It held onto that position in the face of uncertainty over the tariffs. I think the imposition of those tariffs paralyzed the Fed to some extent, and they're now in a position where it looks like the employment mandate overrides the inflation mandate, and we have a future where they're likely to be less restrictive. Well, what that means is we may get some help on the jobs front, but we're giving up to some extent on the inflation front. Inflation is at 3% and rising. So those are the key things. They're independent of narratives in the Senate and House on these investigations. We'll see how those turn out, but that's a different issue.
Douglas, great to have you back. Douglas Holtz-Eakin, president of the American Action Forum. We appreciate your insights always here on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. We've got breaking news on the terminal. Didn't think it would happen this quickly, Kriti, but a new prime minister named in France. It was right around this time yesterday. We were talking about the confidence vote. Here we are 24 hours later. Sébastien Lecornu, France's next prime minister, the armed forces minister tapped by Emmanuel Macron.
The 39-year-old armed forces minister who was part of consideration the last time around didn't quite make it. We'll see if this changes some of those budget priorities.
It's a pretty major breaker. We'll have more on this coming up in Bloomberg Business Week Daily as well when we reconvene at 5 p.m. Eastern. Join us on the late edition of Balance of Power. We're going to have a lot more to talk about. And of course, you can find us only here on Bloomberg TV and radio.